How do people become peaceful warriors? Well, they already are. They're in training. Life is our training. If we view our relationships as a form of joyous training, then it's different from how can this satisfy me? How can this make me happy?
Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. Hi, I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean, and this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Please check us out online at couplesynergy.com or on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Couple Synergy. And please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. And now on to Couple Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for over 25 years.
Everyone says you should work on your relationship, but nobody teaches us how. So we've created this podcast to teach people what they can do to create the relationship they've always dreamed of
with the partner they fell in love with. On today's episode, we have a special guest. We welcome world-renowned spiritual teacher Dan Millman. Besides being a personal inspiration in our lives, Dan is a former world champion athlete, Stanford University gymnastics coach, martial arts instructor, and Oberlin College professor. His 18 books are published in 29 languages. His first book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, was adapted to film in 2006. Over a span of 40 years in 32 countries, Dan has taught Peaceful Warrior's Way, a practical approach to living an aware, purposeful, and healthful life. Thank you so much, Dan, for being on our podcast today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So, Dan, I wanted to let you know, and I kind of said this in correspondence, but your work has been truly inspirational, not just for us, but also for the clients that we work with. And for over 25 years, one of the things that I require my clients to do is to read The Peaceful Warrior. I work with husbands and Jean works with the wives. And so a lot of the times I find that, men are really lost, and they don't know how to step into that peaceful warrior role in their lives and also in their marriage. And so I wanted to really thank you for being on the podcast today to talk about the Peaceful Warrior Way.
Well, I'm happy to do so. And for those who aren't familiar with me or my work, probably I should say something about the term peaceful warrior, because it sounds like an oxymoron. How can you be peaceful and a warrior at the same time? And why have my seminars for the last 40 years pretty much attracted an equal number of men and women, which is interesting because most new age or spiritual type trainings attract about 95% women. I've noticed that over time. So what is it? Is it about balance? Maybe so. When I was teaching at Oberlin College, I was teaching a course in martial arts, specifically Aikido and Tai Chi. And most of us have heard of both of these arts. And I was going to call it for the school catalog Way of the Warrior. But then I said, well, that doesn't quite fit, because these are both arts that are more receptive. They're not aggressive arts. And so a light bulb moment I went, why don't I call it the Way of the Peaceful Warrior? And that's when the term first was coined. But I've had a chance to contemplate how that came up in my life and why I say everyone, you, Ray, Jean, myself, everyone I know is a peaceful warrior in training. And the reason I say that is because aren't we all seeking to live with a more peaceful heart in our relationships, in life, business, amidst the daily news, a sense of equanimity, serenity, collaboration, rather than competition. And at the same time, there are moments in our lives we need a warrior's spirit, that inner discipline, that toughness to roll up our sleeves and march into life and deal with the loss of face, the vulnerability that relationships involve. As someone once, Sandra Ray, I think it was, she said the relationships are the best seminar in town because we learn a lot about ourselves. Everybody knows that. So that's what I mean by peaceful warrior, peaceful heart, warrior spirit.
Were you always a peaceful warrior, or were there moments in your life that shifted you?
Well, I don't think it's a club you can join or something you have an initiation to. Daily life is our school. I view daily life and relationships as a form of spiritual weight training. If you don't lift any weights, you don't get any stronger. I think the way Socrates put it, and not my old mentor, not the man I met in the service station as described in the book and the movie, um, but actually the ancient Greek. He had a challenging marriage, and he once said, by all means, marry. He said, if you choose well, you'll be happy. And if you don't, you'll become a philosopher.
It's funny. It reminds me of a client I used to work with years ago. He was actually a Buddhist monk. And he grew up in the United States, but then, went to Tibet, became a Buddhist monk, came back during a conference and met an old high school girlfriend and reconnected. And he left the monastery and they got married. And I was seeing him because obviously they were having some relationship issues.
Mhm.
And one of the things he said to me was that it's really easy to be in a room as a monk and meditate all day. It's extremely hard to be in a relationship with someone.
That reminds me of a true story that happened to me. A man, after reading Way of the Peaceful Warrior, a fellow wrote to me and said, Dan, I've read your book and now I wanted to put more time into spiritual practice. He said, I've got a wife and 3 kids and a full-time job. How can I find the time? And that's when I reminded him, as you just noted, that his wife, his children, his full-time job were his primary spiritual practices. And they're more demanding and more difficult and develop us more than sitting in a cave somewhere and meditating. I know because I've done both.
It reminds me of The Journey of Socrates, that book that you wrote. And it is so full of pain. He has those mundane times too, where he's told to keep sweeping stuff out or whatever, but the pain that he had to endure. And what does pain have to do with our spiritual development?
Well, in my book and in the film, depicted in the film, even though I didn't drive as crazy as shown in the movie, I was on a motorcycle and a car turned in front of me, and I shattered my right thigh bone, my right femur, in about 40 pieces. It was shattered. It wasn't just broken. And that's part of the story, and that's obviously a factual part of the story. And that incident changed my life because I was in my late teens, early 20s. So I was, I considered myself bulletproof. I knew everything, as many people in their 20s seem to do. It's a time of confidence and taking risks and going for it. And that shook me up, and I'm pointing up right now. It made me ask bigger questions about life. Now, I do not recommend fractures as a method of spiritual development. It can be easier. Lessons repeat themselves in our relationships and in everyday life until we learn them. And if we don't learn the easy lessons, they tend to get more dramatic until a crisis brings us into confrontation with ourselves and our tendencies. So I sometimes ask audiences, please raise your hand if you've experienced physical, emotional, or mental pain in your life. Of course, all the hands go up immediately. And I go, well, but we don't have to agree on everything. If we agree on everything, only one of us is necessary, right? But I hope we can agree on this. Wouldn't you say that difficulty, that adversity, that pain, overcoming that to this point in time, wouldn't you say you're a little stronger now? Most people nod their heads. Wouldn't you say you're a little wiser now? They also nod their heads. So even though we don't have to pretend to like when a difficulty happens, some challenge or adversity, which is a part of everyday life, joy, comfort, and also challenges, we don't have to pretend to like it or recite sayings like let go and let God and so on. But we have to keep that thread of attention that this is a form of spiritual weight training. It is going to make us stronger and wiser. And just as we've overcome past difficulties, we can overcome this one. It's just a process, step by step. So it's not an innate part. Pain isn't an innate part, but whenever there's an emotional charge, there's a lesson to be learned.
For sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. And we know that. We've gone through our own set of pain points in our life, and we feel honored to be able to help couples go through their pain points as well.
That's one thing that you said is there's being an example is the only thing. And that's been the premise of our life, is our relationship, and modeling what we can and bringing couples to that place. And, it's a lot of things that, and I'm sure you had the same experience, we didn't know. And because of the way that we're wired, it drove us to become so much more within our relationship as a priority, and then to take that into the world and teach couples and help them develop, because we all start out as parent-child relationship.
Yes. And that's our model. And we do the
Mhm.
best we can within that model. And some people are lucky and their parents are relatively, they get along pretty well. Everybody, bumps heads now and then, of course. But other people, it's traumatic, it's abusive, and much more difficult. But sometimes the lotus, it grows. The beautiful lotus grows from the mud. So sometimes climbing out of a dark hole gives us the strength to climb the mountain. And by the way, something that's not in my introductory material or my bio is that I was married at 21. My wife at the time was 19. And we were married early, and it wasn't to match, it just was going to stick. So we were married 8 years, 8 very difficult years, not arguing, not yelling at each other. We didn't argue at all, but we weren't a fit. And it was impulse. Let's get married. Okay. Let's have a baby. Okay. Not really thinking about where we were going, what we were doing. So I was married for 8 years and divorced. And of course, I get along fine with my former wife now. She calls me her husband. And I'm on the phone every week with my daughter of that marriage. We get on very well. She comes to visit us. We go visit her. So that worked out well. We were able to transcend that and mature through it, all of us. But I was divorced. So I know I've looked at life from both sides now. I did see my mistakes, my immaturity, resistance, and all that. And then I found joy, the love of my life. And we've been married for, we'll have our 49th anniversary.
Wonderful.
This fall. So I have looked at from both sides now, and we are much more compatible. Joy sends her regards, but she doesn't choose to take part in these kinds of things. So, and she's out in the other room now doing some work, and just love her dearly, and more every year. So I've had a difficult relationship. I've had a very, very good one, but that doesn't mean it's without our bumps. In fact, it took me maybe 20 years to finally realize that Joy was not criticizing me. She was improving me, sometimes rather enthusiastically.
Do you improve her?
Well, just this morning, I gave her some tips on an exercise she was doing. We do physical exercise every morning to start our day right. And I was just giving her some tips. So I guess in little ways, but I think she does a lot of the improving.
It is interesting being in a relationship and the way the female brain is designed to be looking for the problems and looking for something more, that much more seeking, where guys kind of need more of a nudge.
Yeah, there's a lot of humor about the differences between men and women. And obviously, it's not in every single person. It's just a generalization, of course. But it is amusing to look at some of these tendencies of males and females. John Gray's an acquaintance of mine. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Whether you like that book or not, most people found it engaging because of these differences. Like two different people, literally like from different planets, have to learn to get along and kind of understand each other. If they ever fully do, I don't know.
When you talk about spirit and spirituality, how does, as a person, there's lots of techniques that you do that, can help you be in touch with yourself and experience the world. How do you bring that into your relationship?
Well, to me, relationship, let me put it this way. When I was young, I really didn't know myself very well. And when you don't have that self-knowledge, you end up making the right decision for the wrong person, the one you thought you were. But we change over time, and we realize that's not where I am. Most of us have had that experience in relationships and or careers or work. So now, the more we know ourselves, and I mean this specifically, what are my talents? What am I good at, not good at? What are my values? What is meaningful for me, and what do I value? And what are my interests? These are three areas. And, some people confuse their interests with, it's overshadowed by, what do I think I should do? Who should I be with? What's my mental resume and my mental image of a good person to be with? And so we have these ideas that may or may not match who we really are. So the better we know ourselves, the better decisions we make, the wiser ones. And that takes time. Now, that word spiritual is a tricky one, because for some people it means religion, for some people, or faith of a different nature. For some people it means inner work, all about our inner life. And I once asked my daughter, I have 3 daughters, one from the previous marriage and 2 with Joy and I, and 5 grandchildren, 2 grown ones and then little ones as well. We're active grandparents here in Brooklyn. And when my daughter was 10 years old, she's an author now, when she was 10 years old, she loved to read. And I asked her, can you give me a list of maybe 5 or 10 your favorite spiritual type books? And she gave me a list the next day. And the funny thing was, not a single one of those books dealt with New Age themes or religion or the occult or metaphysics. They were books that inspired her, that uplifted her. So to me, that's what spiritual is. It's that numinous quality that uplifts us, that is like life's bigger picture, that we can take a step back, almost like going from down in the weeds at the base of a mountain to the mountaintop suddenly. And we look at a 360-degree panorama and go, because everything looks more beautiful in the distance. And so we say, it's all unfolding naturally and perfectly. It's all going to be okay. So otherwise we can get tunnel vision. And many couples do that. Just tunnel vision on one problem, one area of conflict, instead of, what are we here together for, to do? I've heard it said, I think it was in The Little Prince, that book, it's not about looking into each other's eyes. It's about both of us facing the same direction into our future. And it's a cliche you've heard before, all of us have heard it, but I think it's a lovely analogy that each of us, and in relationships it certainly applies, we're like cars driving through the night, and we can only see as far as our headlight beams. But even so, we can make the entire journey that way.
So can I ask this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've been wanting to ask you about this one.
Okay.
My favorite book of yours is Life We Were Born to Live.
Yeah.
And looking at those patterns that you're talking about and ways that we sort of resonate in the world, what inspired you to write that book?
Well, let me just refer to another book called Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit, which is the culminating book of my career. It's my 18th and final book. I don't feel moved to do any more writing. That was my final book. And that is a memoir, the true story behind the story of Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And in that book, I describe 4 mentors. These are our major teachers. See, many people who read the book or see the Peaceful Warrior movie, they think I just met this wise, eccentric old guy in a gas station, and then I ended up teaching. But there was a 20-year initiation, a period of working with these 4 different mentors, one after the next, and moving on for various reasons. The first I called the professor. It was a technological approach. Do these exercises in this particular way, working with a group of people. I did a 40-day training, 40 days in a row, 10 hours a day. And that started it. And then there was an advanced training and so on. But doing all these this kinds of inner work, visualizations, breath work, deep relaxation, movement, body, mind, mindfulness type exercises from all the traditions, a global heritage. So that was the technological approach. Was I enlightened at the end? Not quite. Then I found the guru. And this was the whole archetypal thing of surrendering to a teacher who represents the divine, and it's a direct relationship with the teacher. And I was with a guru. Joy accompanied me, my wife, on all these journeys. She worked with the professor. She worked with the guru. For 8 years, we were in his community. And then I met the warrior priest. And then finally I met the sage who brought me back down to earth, to everyday life. But the warrior priest was the one who taught in an advanced training the rudiments of this life purpose system that I convey. And getting back to your question, Gene, in The Life You Were Born to Live, it was a very difficult, challenging book to write. It's a major reference work. And the latest edition has all 45 life paths, including some children with unusual birth numbers born after the year 2000. So that book is my second best-selling book. It's several million copies have been read, and the way it gets passed around. So that book, by the way, let me just say this rather than just talking around the book, because maybe your listeners don't really know what is this book. By the way, the way the title came up is we were trying to figure out what to call this book. You know, we were going to call it The Number Book, Your Life Purpose Book, and our daughters were watching The Sound of Music on the TV. Joy and I walked through the room just when the Mother Superior was saying, Maria, you have to go out and find the life you were born to live. And that's that's the title, The Life You Were Born to Live. So that system, I can't rationally explain how adding up the numbers of your date of birth can give valid, reliable, accurate information about the core issues of your life. But as millions of people know and would testify, it has uncanny accuracy. And the way I look at it is, if you look at a tree outside our window or your window, chances are there's not a single tree on the entire planet exactly like that tree in terms of the angle of every branch and leaf and stem. There's no exact duplicates. But so in other words, but you can say things about ashes or redwoods or birches that are different from oaks or elms or other kinds of trees. So even though each of us is unique, we're not a number, but each of us is unique. We have our own ancestry, we have our own culture, our own life experiences. We do fall into certain patterns, and those patterns do apply. And it's like when we were born, our parents gave us a name and spirit gave us a frequency, let's say, at which we're vibrating. So that's described by a number. Now, any of your listeners can go to my website, peacefulwarrior.com, and just click on Find Your Life Purpose. And there's a life purpose calculator right there. They can just put in their date of birth and get a taste, a sample. There's much more to it, but a sample, and they can dig deeper if they wish. They can get the Life Purpose app and all that, or the book, but a taste of some core issues of their life based on their date of birth. And what's also interesting is just below that Life Purpose calculator, they can put in the date of birth of a significant other, someone they're in a personal or business relationship, and get a composite number with the issues that may come up in that particular relationship. So I hope that responds to your question, how it applies to relationship.
Jean is an avid student of numerology, and she uses it in her work with her clients as well.
Nice.
You know, I was going to ask you this: in this world, it seems like a lot of people are very lost, right? There's a lot of pain and a lot of suffering and a lot of anger. And, you know, Fitzpearls and Alfred Adler, they talk about this drive for self-actualization that's innate in all of us, right? This digging for our inner self. And that's a lot of the work that you do. I guess the question goes out that why should we? You know, it seems like a lot of hard work, and it seems like you're swimming upstream in this world that's going on right now. And I was wondering if you might be able to share some thoughts on that.
Well, there's a writer named Barbara Rasp who had a great quote. She wrote, "The lesson is simple. The student is complicated." You know, in business, for example, the problems are not usually about the work itself. It's about the personalities at the workplace. People are difficult and they complicate everything. We complicate sex, we complicate food, we complicate all kinds of things rather than, and again, a lot of this has to do with bad habits of the mind. For example, most of us would we've heard so many times about living in the present moment that we might roll our eyes, oh, again, Dan's telling us to live in the present moment. Well, there's a little more to it than that. To really understand what that means, for example, any physicist will tell us there's no such thing as the present moment. Because if I try to grasp the present by going, now, from the time I started saying that word, to the time I said, ow, 1,000,000 nanoseconds have passed. Which nanosecond, is the present? How can we grab it? So really, teachers like myself are just saying, let's handle what's in front of us. Let's start to recognize that what we call the past no longer exists except as a set of impulses in our brain we call memory. And what we call the future is imagination. Now these are wonderful abilities, human abilities, to remember, recall things we've experienced, and to plan our day, for example, and use our imagination. But unfortunately, these tools like technology today, it's using us rather than just us utilizing them, because most of us spend our time and attention in an illusory world of past and future. In this present moment, there are no thoughts. For example, if I was sitting in the room with you two and I took 2 sets of keys and threw a set of keys to each one of you and said, catch, you would both be reaching out. Now, you wouldn't be thinking in that moment of what you're going to do later today or what you did yesterday. You would be pure like cats, just pure awareness reaching to catch the keys. Because as soon as we think about anything, we're thinking about the past or the future. In the present, this is this moment of power, the moment of sanity, the moment of reality, right now. And if someone can say, well, wait a minute, Dan, I know that the past is real. Look, here's a picture of my 5th birthday party. But all that's really happening is in that moment, you're showing me a photographic image that represents something to you, a memory. But it's all happening now. So, when I say, hey, what do you want to do later today? And Joy says, Dan, come back to the present. I go, I'm in the present. Right now, I'm in the present asking what you think we might want to do later. I'm not attached to it, that kind of thing. So she often gives me these reminders and I give them to her too, but not in a snide way. Just it's fun. It's like a game. So this is how we can make our lives simpler, by what we do in the present moment. And this is a big one. Here's a big one. The most controversial thing I have to teach is I do not encourage people to feel happy. I do not encourage people to feel courageous or confident or loving or kind. I only encourage people to behave that way. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, but isn't that pretense? Doesn't that lack authenticity? I mean, isn't that even hypocrisy to feel one thing and behave in another way? I mean, shouldn't we trust our feelings? Well, when people say trust your feelings, I think what they're saying is trust your deepest intuition. Trust that whispered voice in your heart. Not, go trust every emotional impulse that arises. And some people say, well, how do I know the difference between trusting my intuition, like in a relationship? What's the difference of trusting my intuition and an emotional impulse? And that's easy to answer. Wait it out. Give it a little time, because emotional impulses pass through us like the weather. We may feel like, I have to do this, I have to do that. But if we give it a little time, whether it's an hour, a day, a week, it's going to pass. If it's an impulse, if it stays with us, if it continues and persists, then maybe it's our intuition speaking to us. So
I often tell my clients that emotions are like, they're like the signals on a dashboard. They're telling you something is happening, right? And you have to attend to that.
Exactly. Emotions have information. They can be very valuable. If I'm every time I see a person, if I'm feeling depressed or angry, there's something I need to talk about or work out or work through. I'm repeating really essentially what you said. I'm affirming that, Ray. So yes, emotions, But are they designed to rule our lives? That's a chaotic life. An emotion-driven life, an emotion-centered life is chaotic because emotions change all the time. And here's what I found in my own life, maybe in yours, or maybe in your viewers. I've found that I don't have any direct control over my emotions. I can do various techniques to try to influence what I'm feeling, change my state, let's say. But to just will myself to feel different from the way I'm feeling right now, I don't think so. And same with my thoughts. Thoughts happen to us. They appear in our field of awareness. We don't say, I think I'll think this thought next. So thoughts just happen. So rather than focus on, because look, most people, if they're in physical pain, they naturally want to go see someone to help reduce or relieve the pain. They see a health practitioner, a massage therapist, chiropractor, doctor, whoever. And if they're in emotional pain, often in a relationship, they seek people to help them feel better. So many people are seeking more than anything to feel good more of the time and feel bad less of the time. And unfortunately, many people get married or form a relationship because they feel that rush of endorphins, the dopamine and the oxytocin and all that good huggy stuff. And they feel that, but then that fades over time. And then they go, am I falling out of love? Because they're measuring everything in the feelings they feel rather than how they're behaving. So let me finish that saying, when I said I'm not encouraging people to feel this way, I'm encouraging them to behave that way. The way I would put it is this: if there were a toddler that you saw running across the street and cars were whipping right and left, going each way, you might be terrified to run in the street after that child. But you find yourself doing it because the child needs saving. And you grab the child while feeling terrified, you grab the child and you run back and save it. Now, you were feeling one thing and behaving in quite a different way. In fact, we can only show courage when we're feeling afraid. So in the same way, someone can be shy and walk up to someone and say, hi, would you like to go out for coffee? Someone can be irritated in their relationship and say a kind word instead. It's not easy to do because our tendencies are to just go with whatever we're feeling in the moment and behave that way. But this is a form of liberation. Talk about spiritual work. To be able to choose, what am I going to do? What needs doing right now in line with my purpose? And no matter what I'm feeling or thinking. So to acknowledge, a Japanese psychiatrist named Shoma Morita once said, to live wisely and well, I recommend 3 things. First, accept your thoughts and feelings as natural to you in that moment. Accept them the way you would in meditation. Notice them, acknowledge them. The second thing is form a purpose. What is your purpose? What would you like to accomplish? What is your goal? And third, do what needs to be done in line with your goal. So this approach to living that I teach, the Peaceful Warrior's Way, involves what we actually do, because our lives are shaped more than anything by what we've done over time.
And it's definitely a practice
Yes.
that you have to reaffirm every single day.
Yeah.
I heard you talk about a practice that you did. I think you said it was a meditation you did daily for like 4 minutes. In the beginning, you did it every day, and then you kind of tapered off. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Talk about bigger picture. I was sitting in a seminar many years ago with a Roshi, a Zen monk, and he was talking about meditation. And I came up to him on a break and I said, Reb, his name, and I said, Reb, could you tell me what 2 main points would you say about how to meditate properly? And he said, yes, first, you must have a good posture, not leaning forward into the future or backward into the past, but stable in this moment. And the second thing you need to do is to die. Now, I knew he wasn't really talking about physical death, but he didn't really go into it because it was the end of the break and he finished his talk. But I contemplated this for a while, and I realized he was talking about a psychological death, a letting go of attachments. Because if we sit down to meditate and we're going, oh yeah, I've got to run some errands later on. Or, God, I wish I hadn't said that. Regrets come up during the meditation. We're still attached to life. We're still half there and half deep. But by letting go of attachments, then we can meditate more deeply.
Easier
And
said than done, right?
say again?
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. So, contemplating this, I said, what is it about death? What do we have to give up when we die? And that's when this meditation came to me. It's a 4-minute meditation, which I still do almost every day. But yes, you're right, Gene, that I did it for every day for a year and a half without fail before I ever taught it. And then, it was more loose. I would do it as a refresher. Now, why would anyone want to meditate on death and what we have to give up in the process of dying? Well, because there's nothing that helps us to appreciate life more. Let me put it this way. What if I asked your listeners, how do you think you'd feel if you woke up tomorrow morning and discovered this wondrous discovery? You could fly. You could just will yourself to float off the ground, fly over your house, fly over a forest and all around your neighborhood, and you could soar. How do you think you would feel about that? And I get words like ecstatic, liberated, free, happy, joyous, and so on. And I say, yes, probably you would feel that way. But what do you think you'd feel in a month or in 6 months? And they say, well, I don't know. It's like, oh, I wish I could fly faster. I'm late to work. Or there go the friendly skies. Everybody's flying around here. I've got a duck. And we would take flying for granted, I almost guarantee, as much as we take seeing or hearing or tasting or touching or a relationship. So we don't all agree on what happens after we die. Many of us have read books on near-death experiences and so on. But so some people believe we ascend to a heavenly realm, others we reincarnate, others believe something else. But I think we can agree that the body does decompose. That as that particular body and personality, it goes away. And what do we relinquish? Well, I went into what is it that we actually have to surrender the moment of death? It's like a rehearsal. And so it helps us to transcend the fear of death. It makes it like a friend. Oh, this is the process I'm going to go through. Not exactly like the meditation, but I have to let go of all the things I do. So in this 4-minute meditation, by the way, people can learn that. There are several online courses at my website they can link to. If anybody's interested, they can learn that meditation, or even a 4-minute workout, the Peaceful Warrior workout. So there's a lot of features at the website. But the point of this meditation is it helps us to appreciate, because after we surrender all these things in this meditation, after 4 minutes, we do a few more breaths and all of it comes flooding back in. Time, objects we can play with, relationships, interactions with other people. So it goes into all the things that we can appreciate in this life. And I've had more appreciation for the simple things in life since doing this meditation. So including relationships. When we're having a difficult time in a relationship, we need to consider if we didn't have it. And many people fantasize, oh, life would be so much better if I didn't have it, because this is difficult. And it's like people stay in a relationship until it threatens this locked-in sense of self. And if they have to lose face, some people would rather lose a relationship than lose face, or be humbled, or realize that that person may have given us more than we've given back. So there are various things people can do to help heal resentment, as you know, and turn it into a sense of gratitude and even indebtedness.
Well, one of the things you were saying earlier is, pain is associated with growth. And most people don't know that pain is associated with growth in a relationship. They just can't tell the difference between pain in growth and pain in destruction.
Because you can blame your partner.
Because you can blame your partner for it.
Right.
One of the things I was thinking about when you're talking is that, we were born and raised in the Chicagoland area, and so coming from a really big city to out here in rural Colorado has been quite a huge shift for us. Right. And one of the things we learned over COVID was so much distraction being in our lives. And we took that opportunity to really remove a lot of that distraction, right? Taking out the garbage, and We've found that being here, taking out the garbage, removing all those distractions helps us really focus on our own personal growth and also our growth as a couple. I just wonder, how can people in big cities or people who are surrounded daily with that distraction, how can they stay centered on that peaceful warrior way?
Well, again, it comes back to the idea of daily life being our school, our center of learning. If you view Earth as a divine school for souls, then daily life is our classroom. And as it happens, there are 12 courses. I write about it in one of my books that we need to at least, if not master, at least gain facility in order to graduate, let's say. And so daily life is our classroom. And in fact, it's guaranteed to teach us our relationships, challenges in business, making an income, physical ailments and health. Those things will make particular demands, and they come up for all of us at different kind of points in our life. And they will teach us everything we need to learn in order to evolve. Now, people were evolving before books and seminars. So daily life, we have to trust that it is all about learning life's lessons. One of my little books, don't know if you've read it, but it's called The 4 Purposes of Life. And when I was writing the book, a friend of mine came up, looked over my shoulder and said, Dan, I don't need to read your book. I know the purpose of life. It's learning to love. Whatever the question, love is the answer. I said, well, that sounds really good. That sounds like a good purpose. And then another friend said, no, he said, the purpose of life for humans is enlightenment, is God realization. And I went, well, that sounds like a really good purpose too. And another friend said, well, but that's kind of philosophical. He said, our biological purpose is to keep reproducing, to keep the human beings going on the planet. And I said, yeah, that also sounds like a good purpose. But you know what? Just as we divide the points on a compass into 4 primary directions, or the days of the year into 4 seasons, by looking at our lives through 4 purposes, it really helps us get a sense, a handle on what daily life is for. And so the first purpose is simply learning life's lessons in the school of daily life. The second has to do with career, but also our calling, our mission, our hobby, what we like to do in our spare time, what we're drawn to. And the third purpose is the one you referred to before, Gene, described in The Life You Were Born to Live, finding our life path and some of these core issues we need to deal with in our life to feel on track. And the fourth and final purpose is the one that appears in each moment. Because I may not know my cosmic purpose, but I do know my purpose right now in this moment is sharing with you. And your purpose, you know that very well too. So we usually know our purpose in this moment. So these are 4 purposes we deal with. And so everyday life is really trusting that, when we change altitude, every time we evolve, we go to a different level, a different sense of attitude. You mentioned self-actualization earlier, and Adler and Fritz Perls, but also Abraham Maslow, of course, he talked about the different stages of self-actualization. And we have to work on one area, survival, and then social relationships and so on, up to this yearning for life's bigger picture. And maybe that's why so many people have been inspired by Way of the Peaceful Warrior, because I offer reminders. That's all I can do as a teacher, offering reminders, observations, suggestions about life's higher promise and potential. And so I don't expect someone, most of the time, most of our daily lives are spent conventionally. We are in conventional relationships with all the expectations therein. We are in dealing with the kids or education or work. And that's where appropriately we should spend most of our time and attention. But there's also another level of being, call it the transcendental. And many of us have flashed on that in moments in our lives, whether meditating or just spontaneously. And we suddenly saw the bigger picture of life and that it was okay. Everything is unfolding beautifully, as it should, through 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So anyway, that's what comes up around that question, Jane, in terms of How do people become peaceful warriors? Well, they already are. They're in training. Life is our training. And it's a different model, a different frame. If we view our relationships as a form of joyous training, then it's different from how can this satisfy me? How can this make me happy? Because I view happiness as a practice. Now, I ask people, how do you behave when you're happy? Are you more present? Yeah. Are you more enthusiastic? Yeah. Are you kinder? I'd say so, when we're feeling happy. So I say, you know how you behave, so bring that into life. Bring that into your relationship. Sometimes, you know that old cliche about if someone doesn't have a smile, give them one of yours. You know, maybe you've heard that, of course. So sometimes something as small as a smile can make a huge difference. Just smiling at your loved one.
Even just smiling alone.
Yes. Or Thich Nhat Hanh used to call it the inner smile too. This is a true story. This woman came up to me after a book signing once and said, Dan, I want you to know, your work meant a lot to me, blah, blah, blah. But she also said, I want you to know that I was ready to take my own life. At one point in my life, I didn't think anybody cared about me at all, and I didn't care either. And I knew I was walking home. I knew what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. I was going to take my own life. And she said, on the way home, I saw some shoes approaching me. My head was sort of down, and I glanced up, and there was a very handsome man walking toward me, and he gave me this big smile. And she said, I know it sounds crazy, but that smile, I wanted to hold on to that for a while. That got me through that evening. And the next day I went and saw a therapist. I got some help, and I'm still here today. And that man will never know what that simple smile accomplished. And so it may not save someone's life when we smile at them, but it might make their day. It might lift their moment.
It's a great example of how much of an impact we have from one person to the other. And, your work has impacted the world in many ways. And want to thank you so much for the impact you have had on our lives and lives of our listeners and everyone that has crossed your work.
Well, it's very, very gratifying. I had no idea. I didn't plan on any of this. I really didn't.
It's like you were saying, like right now we're focused on what our purpose is in this moment, but we have no idea who's going to hear this and how that's going to, and that's the cosmic purpose, right? Is you just do what you're supposed to do. And, you wrote that book and it's huge.
Yeah. Well, 18 books it only took me 40 years to do it. I didn't write another book after Peaceful Warrior for 10 years because I felt I'd said what I had to say. But then new mentors entered my life, as I mentioned, and new information. And I was so excited to share it that I did the work necessary. I was the typist. So I hope people continue to enjoy it for many years to come.
People have been sharing stories since the beginning of time to bond and heal and grow. But by you sharing some of your stories today with us, it's enriched your life and the lives of our listeners.
Oh, thank you, Jean. There's a wonderful quote. I don't happen to be a particularly religious person, but I love the quote. It's God invented men and women because God loves stories.
That's awesome.
Dan, if our listeners want to learn more about your work and about what you do, where can they go? What's the best place?
Sure. As I'd mentioned, the best place is the website, peacefulwarrior.com. And there are some free things there, and people might enjoy the various offerings.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on our podcast today, Dan. I want to thank all of you, our listeners, for joining us today. Our passion is in helping couples and people have happy and healthy relationships. And this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners. For all of you listening, please let us know how you enjoy the show. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. For more information about Couple Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, the home study course, the next Couples Relationship Enhancement Weekend, and our premier couples coaching program called Couple to Couple, look us up online at couplesynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and share it. And thank you for listening.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.